most of the stuff, if you go back and look at most of the stuff, sorry for this because I'm going to
Yeah.
end up broke and I'm going to end up frustrated. Car enthusiast thing, isn't it? It's you. If I wanted just a good car that handled well and performed well, I would just get a Camry, which outperforms any car that I grew up on.
One of the key takeaways from me was the variety of stuff that you've gone after on your Insta. And you've, quite comfortable in the fact that you're not catering to any one audience, that you've lost people who kind of followed you because you were doing guitar, doing the couch jams. And then I'm going to do something else next week. So next week's photography and you're using the Sphere. And then you pick people up and you lose them along the way.
Yeah.
And you're okay with that.
It's how it works. It's funny. So there is a big concert going out on the West Coast. It's basically the Gen X and Elder Millennial Metal Fest. I think it's like Sick New World. And my friend Paula is out there. And she was like, I'm at Sick New World. And I was like, oh man, I'm so jealous. She was like, wish you were here. And then I replied, KMFDM sucks, because that's what I mean. That's what you chant at a KMFDM show, though. They even have a song called Sucks. KMFDM sucks. And she was like, KMFDM rocks. I was like, I love KMFDM. I was like, Lucia Chiafarelli, who is a member of the band, she's actually married to the band's founder. I was like, yeah, Lucia followed me for like a month. And then Lucia chimes in. She was like, what do you mean followed you? I still follow you. And I completely, because she doesn't really interact with my posts. But apparently, she still follows me. And I'm like, I haven't seen a like from her for a while, so I just figured that she stopped. No sweat off my back.
Right.
But,
But that's, you bring up a good point on that, which is when people don't engage, like on a deeper level, you wonder, are you still out there? It's
right.
like, either they've just stopped engaging or they've just, for whatever reason, dropped off. I haven't posted anything on Instagram in months. I can't tell you why. I just didn't really think there was anything that interesting. And then I pull out a new set of wheels for the E46, and because I haven't seen them since I bought them on the Black Friday sale. I'm like, these look sharp. Can't wait to get them mounted up and on the car, and all that kind of stuff. And there are people that kind of go, chime in, but there's just some part of me just like,
Well, and Instagram is
the task.
Well, Instagram is so algorithmically driven that you could follow somebody, and unless you spend an entire day sitting there just liking every post they come up with, Instagram won't show them to you. Which, if you're somebody who is trying to build a business around Instagram, I kind of feel sorry for you for that. If you're somebody who is using it to stay in contact with family and friends, I also kind of feel sorry for you for that. It's just not necessarily it helps people who stay laser focused more so. You'll notice that a lot of the car journalists only post about cars in their feed. And I think that it's helpful for them to do that. But if you're somebody who, and also, let's be honest, if you're an enthusiast posting at an enthusiast crowd and you post something that is outside of what you're supposed to post, you get the knuckleheads who scream, this is a car feed, or this, and no, this is somebody's thing that they're doing. So I don't know. It for me, I'm like, I could probably do better if, for instance, I wrote today's bad idea every day or every week.
Yeah.
But I don't have a bad idea every day or every week. No, I do have a bad idea every day or every week. I just don't have a
You just don't feel like telling the rest of the world about it.
Everybody my bad idea every day or every week. And so I get on the ball.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm only 20% into this so far.
Yeah, I had some coffee maybe an hour ago. And today's bad idea. General Electric makes a refrigerator with a built-in coffee maker. Do not buy it. It is a every
That sounds
problem
like a
we've had.
terrible idea.
It has a little Keurig thing in the front, and my wife
Yeah.
is a coffee junkie.
Yeah.
Um, and for her, having a coffee maker built into the refrigerator with a timer that would have her coffee ready when she woke up was a great idea. But every problem we've had with that refrigerator, 100% has been the cause of that stupid coffee maker. So now we're buying another coffee maker to just have on the shelf so that the refrigerator will just work and we won't have to deal with the coffee maker.
I frequently, because my job is often to connect a dollar to a click. If
Right.
I put it in its simplest terms, I design interfaces, but generally speaking, that's the most simplest part. And I use the analogy of you don't want an app or an experience that's a toaster oven. The toaster oven isn't good at anything. All things, people, all at once. It's not a great oven. It's not a great toaster. It's not a great grill.
It's true.
Yet people keep buying them. So
We keep
anyway,
buying them. That's like Alton Brown has a thing about monotaskers. He hates tools that are monotaskers. All the
huh,
toaster, all the toaster oven, well, like all the toaster can do is make toast.
yeah,
You would rather have a toaster oven maybe than a toaster because a toaster oven you could at least make, I don't know, a grilled cheese sandwich.
okay.
But but
You're not going to
I
grill
see what
chicken
you're
in it.
saying. I see what you're saying about a toaster oven not being a great oven and not being a great toaster. If you get an expensive enough toaster oven though, and ask me how I know, you can use it as an oven for a while if your oven dies right before Thanksgiving. So
Oh, so
yeah,
what's the automotive equivalent for you of a toaster oven?
something that's not necessarily great at anything. Um, hmm.
Answer now, but
It's really the modern midsize CUV. If they were a student, they would be a C. And it's not even like I used to have a horrendous hatred of them, and I've had a couple now, and my wife will probably have one as her next car because there are some advantages to them, but most of them around here are uh single occupant people and that could get around in a much smaller car. And Lord knows I'm being more than a little hypocritical as somebody who has a car that probably makes 600 horsepower. Um, but it just seems like they're big and in the way. Although brodozers probably are more so.
Wait. You need to explain that to me. A brodozer.
A brodozer. So,
I've heard
and you've
this.
seen a brodozer. A brodozer is a pickup truck with a lifted suspension
Mhm.
and large, usually 20 to 26-inch wheels, but street tires on them. So they have an
Yep.
off-road suspension, but not off-road tires. So either way you go, they have defeated the purpose of the thing. The liftover height is too high to comfortably use to actually carry stuff in, and they're difficult to get in and out of. They've literally
Mhm.
taken a vehicle and negated every single thing that it could be good at for aesthetics. And they're terrifying as somebody who drives two fairly small, well, three really small cars because even on just a normal F-150,
Mhm.
uh, my car is below the window line.
Mhm.
So you get a brodozer, and if I'm beside you in traffic, you're not going to see me. Just not going to see me. So
So
that
you can I think you are. So I'm going to ask a sensitive question, and obviously we can cut these things out, and it never sees the light of day. But I think you can. One of the things that you've been very helpful is helping me understand context for people not like me, and let's just leave it there as it is. But what? No, but what's I'm interested in hoopties. Seems like it's a uniquely Atlanta thing, or at least came from it. And so I'll give you an example. I worked some years ago. I worked on a grain wholesale company. They were doing these genetically modified grains. I didn't spend too much time on it. But the hard part of selling grains to farmers in the Midwest is they don't believe you. They think everybody that shows up on their property pitching them something is snake oil.
Right.
The only time they start to pay attention is if when their neighbors goes by in a new pickup truck. Then suddenly they're all ears.
Right.
And I tend to think around the world, every culture has its version of this, and every group has its culture of this variation of this. Wait, where did that SOB suddenly get the cash to buy that?
First, what you're calling a hoopty. A hoopty is a broken down, cheap, not very functional.
That's not the lifted one with the crazy wire wheels, right? No.
That's a. So technically, that's a big wheel car, but people call them donks. Donks are a very specific subset of that.
Yeah. And corrected.
Yeah, the word donk the word donk comes from it was a specific year of Impala, and they said that they had a donkey on the side. And so that got shortened to donk. And the culture, and I'm no donk expert, but it is kind of a very southern and specifically southern black, and even more specifically kind of Atlanta based thing was you're a drug dealer, you can't put all that money in the bank, you can't necessarily go out and buy a $100,000 Mercedes or BMW, but what you can do is buy a $1,500 Grand Prix and then put $100,000 into it, and everybody knows that you have money. And I mean,
I'm so glad I asked.
And I mean, it's not really that dissimilar from the grain farmer who sees their buddy come in with the nicest new F-250 off the lot or whatever. It's a way to flex for your neighbors. And as with many things in America, especially the American South, that started from legally dubious beginnings, it just kind of caught on. It became a fashion thing. Like everybody knows he has $100,000 into this car. I work a 9 to 5, but I know that if I want to compete in the social status game, I need to have a car that is set up like that as well.
So you told me when you had a story about how I think what used to be the biggest car show, monthly cars and coffee, I don't know, it's a gathering outside Atlanta. It used to be the biggest one in the country, if not the world. Right. And now you said there's one in California that's kind of surpassed it, just in terms of sheer attendance.
I think there is, but they're still holding on to that branding, and now they even have a couple of different ones with that same caffeine and octane branding. So they have one Friday nights, which is closer to me, which I haven't gone to one of those, and then they have one Sunday mornings, which is the main one, which now has moved out to about 50 miles away from me. And they used to have one that was caffeine and exotics, which was kind of like a great value, left a good cult, or however you pronounce that. But where, it's an invite only, and they put everything on a local art school campus and try to make it so that it's all very aesthetically pleasing, and they charge you money to come in. So
who shows up for these events? Like,
everybody.
Are you seeing it's demographically it's across the board, right?
Demographically,
it doesn't matter.
I am currently, because thanks to new puppy who can't be trusted yet, um, I haven't really gone out and shot anything. But so I'm going back and re-editing some of my old pictures, and what I'm finding is just everything. You got your donks. You have, hilariously, Atlanta has a pretty sizable population of hot rodded uh, Chevy Cobalts. That's a big thing that I did not know that
Wait.
existed here.
Well, so I'm curious how that ever became a thing. It's like a single make, like that's pretty obscure even on like
It is
Cobalt.
pretty obscure, but it kind of makes some sense at the time when the Cobalt SS, the
Yeah.
supercharged version, was released. The arguably the best handled car that had a Chevy badge. It had a Nürburgring time that was faster than a Porsche Boxster.
Okay.
It is a sleeper.
I love sleepers.
And so, I mean, it had everything you want. It came with factory Recaro seats. It could be had with a manual. It was the Cobalt. The Cobalt SS was the car that Civic Si owners built. But because it was a Chevrolet, those folks who would have wanted that performance would not touch it. So it sold for crap. And the HHR SS, almost the exact same car as a what my mom and my wife called a mini hearse, almost the exact same performance, legit sports wagon. Nobody bought them. But if you go back,
I love the fact that your mom and your wife kind of got the same tag on the mini hearse. That's amazing.
Mini hearse. But if you go back in time and read the reviews from Autoblog and Jalopnik and Kelly Blue Book, all of those places, all of them said the same, that was the best handling car that had a Chevrolet badge. It had no lift shift from first to second, so you could keep it floored. Yes, keep it floored and shift from first to second. I mean, just ridiculousness. But it was a Chevy Cobalt. Nobody bought it.
But it seems to have found a new audience.
It does, but they're maybe it's just because I'm old, but nobody wants to hear your straight piped Cobalt.
Yeah, I've been waking up to the sound of certain Harley Davidsons in recent mornings, so I'm less. Straight pipes are just kind of whatever.
And I was talking to a guy, and we were talking because he has an E63 wagon, where his wife has an E63 wagon.
Nice.
And it's getting to the point where it's costing enough to maintain it that a new car makes sense. And I suggested
that's the threshold.
And I suggested to him that maybe the 4-door version of my car, the 850, would be a good idea. It does all the things that he wanted from his next car, except that it's not a wagon. And I pointed out that it has a factory burble tune that he will use for exactly 5 minutes because it will make him laugh, and then it will become annoying. Because you are grown and you will do it, and you'll be like, oh, this has a factory burble tune, and it's all sorts of loud and noisy. And then it's like, yeah, let me turn that down and just turn up the radio. Because the factory burble tune, when you're honestly over 35, I think, maybe even over 25. It's just, although
awesome.
My wife does love hers, so
that's awesome. You left them the notes, which was, because you just touched on this actually, manuals are overrated.
Manuals are overrated.
This is one of those, click, tossing that grenade.
and 100%. And I have a buddy, Andrew, who 100% wants to come on here to argue this with me, because we have argued this for a long time. But let me state my case here. There is, and I think it was Dino Dale Carbonare, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, from the Speed Hunters, who wrote an article once that said, being able to drive a manual doesn't make you special. My grandma can drive a manual and she hates cars. And I feel that a lot of times what we, not even we as car enthusiasts, but enthusiasts in general do, is they say, well, I'm an enthusiast because, and I know that I'm a real enthusiast because I have this archaic skill that is not needed by 99% of the population. And if you don't have this archaic skill that is true for 99% of the population, you're obviously not a real enthusiast. And it's no different than somebody being like, oh, well, you're wearing a Metallica shirt. I bet you don't even know who the first bass player was. And they'll be like, Cliff Burton. Like, no, it's Ron McGovney, but you didn't know that, so hush. But so folks are like, well, you're not really a real enthusiast unless you can drive a manual. Okay, sure. Can you drive a unsynchronized 3 on the tree manual? Then hush. Like, I have a car with a manual. I like driving it for fun. For track driving, it's slower than my car. It's slower than any car that I've had that didn't have a manual. For when I had a daily commute, I did not find pleasure in going from first to second and second to first to first to second to second to first. And so for me, it's like, it's just another gatekeepery thing. Like, if you get joy and pleasure out of driving a car with a manual transmission, go with God. That is great. But I've had people who are like, yeah, the only reason to not have a manual is if you're missing a leg or something. It's like, or that you don't want to drive a manual. I mean, it doesn't necessarily. I'm not Ayrton Senna. I'm not going to be, teaching folks how to heel and toe in my loafers and white socks. I'm just a dude who occasionally enjoys hitting up a curvy road and trying to be smooth. And a manual is fun in those situations, but it is not required in those situations. And for some people, they will only ever want a manual. I used to work with a dude who was like, he liked the manual because he was a little ADD and it always gave him something to do.
Yep. And
that was his thing. He was like, in traffic, he was at least doing something. Otherwise, he was just bored. And I'm like, that is 100% valid. But he never made fun of me for having a car with an automatic. So
I'll grant you that there's I'll use the word fetishization that's around this, and I think the only reason Porsche sells anything with a manual at this point is because U.S. demanded, customer base demanded.
Right.
I guess some of my motivation is, we talk about nostalgia makes us dumb. That's what I grew up. I learned to drive on an agricultural tractor. I think it was an old David Brown or something like that. It probably still shows. But I have, and you brought up the heel toe. When I've tried to do it, I'm not great at it. I probably don't do enough to be very good at it. The people I've been with who do it well, and they drive a piece of, like an 80s, 90s car, and they do it well on some twisties, it's a joy to behold. It is a dance of precision and all kinds of things. Part of where I guess my position on it is, I spend so much time in technology and around technology. I've driven the Tesla. The only thing I particularly care for on it is the acceleration. It's like in
Right.
most every situation I've tried, I've run out of road before I could figure out where the top of it was, the limit was. Um, but everything else about it, I was like bored. And so
Yeah.
that there are so many things that are certain. We're being told that we don't need to do. We don't need the human element. And so, is my favorite. If as things get more technology and more automated, I'm likely going to end up with like an E30 M3 with no radio and no AC and a roll cage. Because the
But
more tech is involved, I want to be able to hear the soundtrack, and I want to feel like I'm part of the process as opposed to letting the software run it.
and I 100% agree with you, but I think this comes back to um, part of the reason that I went into the manuals or overrated thing. There's a guy, Paul Gerard, and he was the Stig, or at least the primary
Yeah,
Stig on the Tanner
yeah.
Faust version of Top Gear USA, and he has a thing where there's a difference between car enthusiasts and driving enthusiasts, and he says that driving enthusiasts like manuals and car enthusiasts don't. And I feel like that's gatekeeping nonsense. But I also feel that there is truth to the fact that there is a difference between a car enthusiast and a driving enthusiast. Like my
Mm-hmm.
father is a car enthusiast. He likes the feel of having a new car, of having a nice car. But he, generally speaking, wants a smooth driving car that gets him from place A to place B, but it has to be
What
nice.
What's his daily right now?
Oh, his daily right now is a 2000 Tundra, which is the car that he has kept the longest, but he is also now retired and cannot really afford to buy all of the cars that he would have. Before he retired,
Mm.
I think he had like 3 Corvettes before he retired. He went through a long string of Acura Legends. He
Wait,
had
wait,
two
wait, 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 wait.
Mercedes.
That's a little bit off the campus. The Legend. Those are
Uh,
great cars.
uh, so here's a story that I've told many times to many people. Um, when I was 13 years old, my dad bought a FCRX7, and he bought an FCRX7 because he wanted it to be my first car, because as a car enthusiast, he wanted his son to have a very cool first car. So he bought it when I was 17. He bought it when I was 13. When I was 15 and a half, he called up Allstate to, not Allstate, Geico, to get a quote. But this was back when you had to work for the government to be a part of Geico. They were a co-op, so they were kind of like, this is as cheap as you're going to get. And he called them up, and they said for a 16-year-old part-time driver of a car, it would cost $5,000 every 6 months on a car that cost after taxes $21,000 to purchase. And he said, you are getting a 4-door Oldsmobile with the lowest possible engine with no cruise control, and that will be your first car. It will not be a sports car. And he traded that car in on the first generation Legend, manual transmission. It was the car that I originally learned how to drive stick on in
Mm-hmm.
like 91, summer 91. He taught me how to drive stick on it. Um, then he traded that one in on the second generation Legend, which is a car that still kind of have a weird love for. Every time I see one, I'm like, I should really buy a second generation Legend coupe, and my wife is like, why? She just doesn't get it. But then
That sounds like your next another post.
it is always a bad idea, a second generation Legend coupe. He probably had 20 cars between the time I was born and the time I was 22, but he had no interest in trucks. And then he was selling. well, such and such at work was like, if you own a house, you need a truck. And I laughed at him, but now I realize I need a truck. And so he bought that truck in 2000, and it is the longest he's had it painted. He got rear-ended by a garbage truck, and he got it fixed. It's I, literally, it is willed to me. So,
It's going to be the 500,000-mile Tundra.
yeah, I mean, basically, he bought it in 2000, and that's been his car ever since. And I mean, he's had other cars. He's not, even when he had Corvettes, he wasn't like the guy who would go and chase down a mountain road. He was a guy who liked driving around in the Corvette with the top down. That was the joy he found. And I think that's a valid thing. But I also think that for me, I have two cars. I have the M850, and I have the Mini Cooper. The Mini Cooper is a more fun car to drive. The BMW is a more fun car to is a better car to get someplace in.
Mm-hmm.
So like, my in-laws are 11 hours away. We've done that trip in the Mini, and it was not great. You could it's just not a great road trip car. M850, I feel, will be a much better road trip car, but I don't know if it's because the limits of it are so high and it is so much. It is not necessarily the enthusiast choice, driving enthusiast choice, unless your enthusiasm is really straight line speed. It is ridiculous.
Well, this goes to I forget his last name, but James from the old Top Gear crew.
Yeah,
Colloquially known as Captain Slow. He said,
yeah,
slow cars driven fast are more interesting than fast cars driven fast.
and
Because in most situations, it's easier to find thresholds.
right. And I mean, I've always said that I like my Mini because I can drive it like an absolute asshole and not break the speed limit.
Yep.
I mean, I can keep it in second gear and top out at 45, 50 and just be
bouncing off the
on it.
limiter.
Yeah, and just be on it. And it sounds like I'm being like insane, but no, I'm not. So, but in the 850 with a 0 to 60 time of less than 4 seconds, where am I ever going to use that? I'm going to take it to the track a couple times. I'm going to be terrified a couple times I take it to the track, and then I'm going to get back in the Mini and go on the track again, where I will actually be faster because I will not be terrified.
You actually mentioned something which was, why isn't go-kart drifting a thing?
I don't understand. And
So,
now I'm
where do you come? What's the inspiration behind this? Like, are you back to playing Mario Kart?
I was
Crash
I
Bandicoot? Like, where are you at?
I don't know. I was just watching, and I think I was watching a video. Um, so one of my many old man hobbies is I do a little bit of woodworking, and there is a channel on YouTube called Make Something. It used to be The Drunken Woodworker. But he got into go-kart racing, and specifically like dirt track go-kart racing. And he had this one video where he bought a new Harbor Freight engine and tore it down and rebuilt it to work within the regs of the organization that he races in. And I was just like, I never had a go-kart. I always wanted a go-kart. A couple of my cousins had a go-kart. And then the other day, it showed up in my recommendations again, like, watch again. And then I started looking, I was like, you know what I don't really think I've ever seen is a drift go-kart. And there are a couple out there, but there aren't a lot. And I'm like, I don't understand why drift go-karts aren't a thing. The cheapest drift car will cost multitudes more than a drift go-kart.
Mm-hmm.
And a drift go-kart, which, as we were talking about this, texting about this, you pointed out that go-karts are a little sketchy on the limit and aren't forgiving at all. And you can spin pretty hard. And I was like, yeah, but that would teach you so much more drift skill than buying an overpriced S14 or S13
Yeah.
and going out there. That would teach you so much more control. I mean, there's a reason that every race car driver you ever really heard of started in karting. And I don't understand why that doesn't exist. But I also happen to have a lawnmower with a engine which my friend Beth, who is a mechanic, promises me can be fixed. But I've already replaced the mower part of it with an electric lawnmower. So I have part of a go-kart.
You have a certain abundance.
Yes. Yes. And
Honestly, I see a franchise opportunity to start a school here, just to find the next generation of drifters. You know, you start them as kids and you work them way up to the ranks, and next thing you know, they're in Japan.
like Rallycross has like the cross kart thing that's
Mhm.
that's going on that folks are, and road racing obviously has traditional like shifter karts,
Yep.
which is a thing. I don't understand why drifting there's no low cost kart option for drift. It seems like if you want to drift, you need to be willing to, and you're going to bash your car into a wall.
Yep.
And that seems like a high cost of entry for a motorsport that bills itself as the grassroots motorsport.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if drifting carts is a bad idea. I feel like it's a very good idea, but that nobody's really done.
You've talked me into it. What do I plan?
Now I just need to learn how to weld.
Well, I can do that. I don't know if I could do it well. One of the things I'm thinking about is filter for guests who we might want to talk to. Some of my initial thoughts around this were a kind of an overall sense of what you lacked in resources you made up for with resourcefulness. And I'm thinking of somebody who interacts with you a lot, which I think is Dadwagon.
Yeah. He I don't even understand his car, man.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like he is on his own quest.
Yeah.
Now, the dragon he's trying to slay is, who knows? I think that's what the interview should be. Like, we get to talk to him as to, I don't necessarily need to know how big the dragon is, but like, what is it? Because he's been doing this one for a while, and I'm seeing the fab stuff he's doing, like the fabrication and some of the CAD drawings he's been posting. And I'm like, wow, this is other level of stuff. Like, it's initially I just thought it was comical. He had this,
A46 wagon with the giant diffuser and the knee splitters or shin splitter. Yeah. No, it was crazy business. And I mean, he's a local guy. He's a friend of some friends. We both came out of kind of the North Georgia BMX scene. So
interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting to me how many of those guys are really into cars, which I didn't know as much when I was more actively riding. But a lot of those guys are really low key car nerds. Like,
because as you and I were exchanging notes about, my progression of magazines, like when I look back to, when I was like 12 and 13, there was a magazine called Computer and Video Games. It was a UK magazine. And that kind of went to BMX, which went to mountain bikes, which at some point it flipped over to car mags, and it was more I got into Volkswagens, so I was into VW Bugs and buses and all that stuff because that's kind of what was cheap and available.
Right.
And then, as I got older, more sophisticated, no, not really. There was a lot more rally magazines, Rally Sport and stuff like that kind of came along. And then, ultimately that kind of, all that craziness kind of gets worked up into like Top Gear magazine and some of the typical stuff. I was and remain amazed when I kind of get off the plane and on that side of the pond and you go to any kind of magazine store and just still see the sheer variety of magazines that are on the shelves there. And as a kid, that was one of my favorite things to do was, if I was traveling with my parents when I was certainly much younger, and hit my dad up for some cash and I go buy some American dirt bike magazines mostly.
Right.
And arguably that's why I ended up kind of choosing some of the career stuff. I loved the graphics. I loved the design. I loved all the numbers and letters and all that stuff. And that's kind of what sucked me into that. The BMX scene was non-existent. I was the BMX scene growing up. Sadly, there was me and some of my buddies, and we'd do stupid stuff, but nothing on, some of the stuff you've been sharing. I'm still in awe of a lot of that stuff, even to this day. And we built some terrible quarter pipes and half. I never got to a half pipe, but we certainly built lots of dumb stuff. What was it like, that scene like, North Georgia BMX in its sort of prime? Who were the kids? Were they all over? Like they were like particular neighborhoods? Was it particular type of kids? Was it?
I mean, there were a decent amount of folks, just all from Atlanta, South Atlanta, all the way up to Athens. The Athens crew, they had their own folks. The Rat Dad Wagon, he's an Athens guy. I think Athens had a advantage over the rest of this area in that they got a free skate park relatively early.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the younger people there just grew up riding really big concrete.
Typically, you think about things that bring us together. Food, right? That's the obvious.
Right.
Cars. But I'm more interested in cars, and I'm more interested in fringes of car behavior. And then obviously it's heavily male dominated.
Right.
But I think that's less so. My sense with car culture today is there's a little bit of an evolution happening. And what I'm excited about hearing about at the gathering you were describing is it's exciting to me when people can come together, fly their colors, whatever they happen to be, but still we can get along and tolerate each other because we all are passionate about these things with wheels under it. And, I think most car guys I know would rather have a collection of cars that value up to say $250,000, $300,000, right? As opposed to one car that's worth $300,000.
Right.
And so I'm intrigued about that spectrum of people where we can come together, we can gather. And that's why I was kind of poking a little bit around what was happening in the BMX scene, because it's obviously gotten fragmented and people have kind of gone back. And if we've learned anything from the pandemic, it's been very polarizing.
Right.
And we've seen a lot of ugliness. And my hope is hopefully with some of the people we can talk to and we can bring and find and celebrate the things that we get excited about, because the donk thing is not something I see a lot of. I don't understand it. A friend of mine told me yesterday I should go watch Atlanta, the TV show, because I need to have better context around that. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
That's probably true. It does get. I mean, Atlanta goes into some weird places, but I mean.
But to me, I found the South more intriguing because I think there are more. It's just more nuanced.
Yeah, and I think that for me as a car guy, what I found is what I want to see is a car with a point of view. I don't necessarily like a Hellcat with the crazy Hellcat and skull graphics and 26-inch wheels and whatnot. That's not what I want. but I can appreciate that the person who got that car had an idea of what they wanted from that car. And that is more interesting to me than the person who just went and bought an SVO and they're like, here's my SVO. Like, good for you. You have a lot of money.
I think you've just, whether you intentionally or not, just declared the POV, the North Star, if you will, for this podcast.
Yeah. I
That's
think
that's
that's
kind
it.
of it.
That's kind of it. Like, there's a guy, Brad Fick, and he is a photographer and videographer. He's done some work with Car and Driver and Motor One. I think he's freelance now, but he is a legit Chrysler K car fan. And for
Right.
me, it's more interesting finding out why somebody is a Chrysler K car fan. And I mean, his thing is that's everybody in his family had K cars. And
Yeah.
like all of his like young person memories were happy memories about cars were had a K car somewhere around them. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's more interesting to me than, well, I'm rich.
Well, it's a little like I 100% agree. I think the recent Road and Track had the musicians and music,
Yes.
and one of the I thought was one of my favorite issues. Not for nothing, I think what they've done with that magazine in its recent incarnation has been amazing. It really feels like it's a much more premier product. The photography and design is really kind of quite fabulous. The new issue with I'm going to rant about the Le Mans thing, but there was the one article I think that really caught my attention was the whole Mazda MVP thing. And I forget which of the musicians it was, but it was like, wait, like a Mazda minivan.
I mean, yeah.
Like, okay, but that's exactly what you're saying. It was like somebody has a point of view. Where it gets interesting is on the surface, just like we make assumptions about people, you think you understand what the motivation is behind that.
I mean, it gets fascinating. Even like Sung Kang, who everybody knows from the Fast and Furious movies. He was
Yep.
Han and whatever. He grew up 20 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. This is not a place that would have a lot of import cars. This is a place that 100% everybody drove a pickup truck or a muscle car. 100%. Its primary business, the two primary things there are a chicken processing plant and the Wrigley's gum plant. Very, very blue collar American. And just from exposure, and he got an acting role, and from exposure to that world, he went from muscle car guy to import guy, but also kind of not even import guy, but kind of like an import star, if you would. And it's interesting to me how I grew up more of a muscle car guy, and now I'm on BMW number 6, which is not really where I even today on BMW number 6 I thought that I would end up. And so it's interesting how just as your station in life changes, maybe your taste in cars change, and you can't even the nostalgia of the cars that you wanted when you were a kid changes.
Right.
Although I do still kind of want a third generation Camaro, but it would be a nightmare for me. I know it would be a nightmare for me because I know what would happen, because I know how much I would want to spend on it, which is all the money.
All the money.
All the money. Because if I'm going to have a third generation Camaro, I would want it to be a third generation Camaro that handles in reality how it handled in my memory of my father and my cousin having Z28s. And when you're 10 years old, Z28 is the fastest, best handling car in the world. When you're, pushing 50, you know that car was not the fastest, best handling car in the world. But if you bought one, you would want to make it that.
Yep, and down the rabbit hole you go, and so does your wallet.
Correct. Especially knowing that there is a company that will make it a very good handling car, but also knowing that that number will have a comma with several digits in front of it. So,
hey, I'm gonna wrap this up a little bit. So I've got a couple of key takeaways. So as I think we're sort of, some of the structure at least is starting to bubble up for me. I know on some level, the thing I would encourage you is you don't have to agree with me at all. In fact, it's going to be more fun if you don't.
So, I mean, I will disagree.
If I say something, you can hold me accountable. I'm like, you moron. What do you mean? It's not. It's a don't. And you're completely sworn off Audi, right?
Yeah. No Volkswagen anythings. So, and I know that there's a healthy aftermarket, and there's a lot of interesting stuff, like the company that puts RS3 engines into Jettas. But fuck them. Like, I can't.
I'm gonna probe around that on a later date. Okay, one last question. We can call it.
My house is burning. Which 3 guitars do I grab? I will grab this red PV. This is my first real guitar. I got this when I was 13 years old. At this point, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be cremated, but if I wasn't, I would probably be buried with this. 2, this is a guitar that I named after my wife. But this is a project guitar that my buddy Jay talked me into, and Jay and I have a weird long relationship where he's the guy who put the 600-pound stereo in the back of his WRX. So he came at it from a different way than me. But and the third one, I have a Ibanez RG problem. This is an RGA. It has the arch top. It just plays really well. If I had to expand that to 4, I would probably pick.
No, the fire department is screaming at you at this point.
The fire department is screaming at me.
They're pushing past you. They got the oxygen. You're handing guitars to the firefighters at this point.
So I'm not going to the 4th one, which will be this one, which is technically a guitar, but is actually tuned like a bass. So that's very different than any of my other guitars. It's 30-inch scale, and it's tuned down an octave low, so I can get stupid heavy. But I would get it just because it would be different. But no, I would. The first 3 that I showed were 100% the first 3 that I would get. So
perfect. Glad I asked.
I knew at some point you were going to ask, because I'm sitting here with, what is this, 7 guitars that you can see, and then 6 more hanging around the room, and then another 7 on the floor in a guitar boat. I have a problem.
There are worse vices for sure.
100%.
George, it's a pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Connor. Today's bad idea is called Today's Bad Idea because it's a bad idea. Like most of the stuff, if you go back and look at most of the stuff from Today's Bad Idea, it's always like, I know that if I do this, I'm going to be very sorry for this, because I'm going to end up broke and I'm going to end up frustrated. And that's part of the car enthusiast thing, isn't it? It's you're looking for the adventure, not necessarily If I wanted just a good car that handled well and performed well, I would just get a Camry, which outperforms any car that I grew up on.
Right.
So,
Amen. All right. It's a wrap.
all right.
Thank you.
Talk to you next week.
Good one. Take care of yourself.
You too, man.
All right.
All
Take care.
right.
Bye.
Bye.